Life is fragile and uncertain. We often live as if tomorrow is guaranteed, but deep down we know it isn't. Each day we wake up, we are given a gift that could just as easily be taken away. Yet, most of us treat time like it's an endless resource, as if we have an unlimited number of mornings waiting ahead of us. This way of thinking can make us careless with how we spend our days, who we spend them with, and what we prioritize. When Scripture says our life is like a mist, here one moment and gone the next, it's not exaggeration. It's a reminder of how quickly everything can change. A single phone call, a single diagnosis, a single accident, and the entire direction of life can be altered. The truth is, no one can predict how long they will live. Young or old, rich or poor, healthy or sick, the reality of mortality stands over us all. That uncertainty is not something to fear, but something to pay attention to. It should shift the way we think about the hours we are given. Instead of pushing off important things for someday, we ought to ask ourselves why we aren't doing them today. Instead of assuming we'll always have time to repair broken relationships or pursue the calling God placed on our hearts, we should recognize that every delay is borrowed time. Our lives are fragile because they depend on so many things outside of our control. That is why wasting them on the trivial feels like a betrayal to the time we've been entrusted with. Think about how quickly a week passes. Think about how the last year felt like it slipped through your fingers. When you look back, there are entire seasons of life that seem to blur together. That is how fragile our time really is. It goes by faster than we expect, and once it is gone, it cannot be recovered. If we lived with that awareness every day, we would be far more intentional about how we use our energy and attention. We would notice the conversations we are ignoring, the moments we are overlooking, and the blessings we are rushing past. We would realize that time is not waiting for us to catch up. It keeps moving, whether we are paying attention or not. What makes life's uncertainty so powerful is that it strips away our illusions of control. We love to believe we can plan out every detail, that we can map out our future and know exactly what will happen. But reality has a way of interrupting those plans. No matter how careful we are, we cannot control the unexpected. We cannot stop tragedy from knocking at our door, nor can we prevent seasons of loss or pain. This realization, instead of discouraging us, should make us grateful for the moments we do have. Gratitude grows in the soil of fragility, because once we understand how delicate life is, we stop taking it for granted. Each day becomes a chance to treasure rather than a task to endure. When we acknowledge how uncertain life is, we also learn to value people more deeply. How often do we assume that the people in our lives will always be there? We postpone phone calls, delay apologies, or withhold affection because we think we have time. But life's fragility teaches us that every encounter matters, because we never know if it will be the last one. The smile you give, the kindness you show, the forgiveness you extend, these could be the final memories you leave behind with someone. To live with the awareness of uncertainty is to treat relationships as sacred, refusing to waste opportunities to love and honor the people God has placed in your life. Living as if life is fragile also reshapes how we handle our dreams and goals. Many of us hesitate to act because we think there will always be a better time. We wait for perfect circumstances that never arrive. But the unpredictability of life means the best time to move forward is now. Waiting endlessly is often just fear wearing the mask of caution. If life is fleeting, then courage becomes essential. We must step into the things that matter, even if we feel unprepared, because delaying could mean missing the chance entirely. Recognizing uncertainty doesn't make us reckless, but it does make us bold enough to prioritize what is eternal over what is temporary. This awareness of fragility also helps us separate what is meaningful from what is meaningless. When we see how short life is, arguments over small matters lose their grip on us. Petty conflicts, jealous comparisons, and empty pursuits don't feel worth the energy anymore. Instead, we start asking better questions. Does this bring me closer to God? Does this help me love better? Does this honor the time I've been given? Fragility clarifies what really matters, and it helps us live with fewer regrets. Every choice becomes weightier, not because we're afraid of making mistakes, but because we understand the value of every moment. And perhaps the greatest lesson of all is that fragility leads us to humility. When you understand how uncertain life is, you stop pretending you are invincible. You stop building your identity on things that can crumble overnight. Instead, you learn to anchor yourself in what cannot be shaken. That humility frees you from the illusion that you are in control, and it opens your heart to rely on God in ways you never did before. In the end, fragility is not a weakness to deny, but a truth to embrace, because it points us back to the one who holds our fragile lives in his hands. When Scripture says in James 4:14 that our life is like a mist, it paints an image that is hard to ignore. A mist is here for a short time, visible only for a moment before it vanishes into thin air. That is how quickly our days pass, no matter how long we think we will live. It is a sobering picture of how fragile our existence really is. You wake up, go about your routine, and before you know it, the week is gone, then the month, then the year. The mist disappears quietly, without announcing that it is leaving, just as time slips away without our permission. That is why this verse strikes so deeply. It cuts through our illusions that we are in control of how long we will be here. This verse doesn't just describe the brevity of life, it also highlights our tendency to forget it. We make plans as though we are guaranteed endless tomorrows. We talk about one day and someday, as if those days are waiting for us in storage, ready for us to claim whenever we want. But the truth is, those days might never come. The mist does not wait. It doesn't stretch itself out for our convenience. It simply vanishes, and yet we keep living as if the mist is solid ground, as if we can hold onto it with certainty. That's why this verse feels almost confrontational. It tells us the truth we try to avoid. Our lives are temporary and our control is limited. Think of the last time you saw your breath on a cold morning. For a second it appeared in front of you, and then it dissolved into nothing. That's the exact imagery James wants us to carry in our hearts. We are like that breath. We are visible for a brief moment in history, and then we are gone. It is humbling when you really sit with it. Most of the things we obsess over, status, money, attention, don't stand up against the reality of the mist. They cannot outlast the shortness of life, and yet we let them consume us as though they are eternal. This perspective forces us to stop asking, "How long will I live?" and start asking, "How will I live while I am here?" The verse is not meant to depress us, but to refocus us. By showing us how temporary life is, it invites us to live with sharper awareness. When we see life as a mist, we begin to treat it with respect. We no longer waste hours on things that drain us or keep us away from our true purpose. Instead, we start to recognize the weight of every choice, every word, every action. The mist reminds us to be intentional, because we don't get unlimited chances to love, to forgive, to build, or to follow God. Each day becomes an opportunity that will not return once it passes. This urgency doesn't mean rushing through life. It means cherishing it with the seriousness it deserves. The mist also strips away our arrogance. James was speaking to people who made plans about their future without acknowledging God, as if their days belonged to them. That same mindset is alive in us today. We map out careers, finances, and relationships as if nothing could disrupt them, but the mist humbles us. It reminds us that the control we think we have is an illusion. All it takes is one unexpected event to shatter the plans we were so certain of. When we understand this, we stop boasting about tomorrow and start leaning into God for guidance today. The fragility of life becomes a doorway to humility, a reminder that every breath is given, not earned. Living with the awareness of the mist changes how we approach relationships. We stop taking people for granted when we realize how fleeting our time with them really is. That argument you are holding onto suddenly feels less important. That apology you've been postponing feels urgent. That moment you could have expressed love becomes too valuable to waste. The mist teaches us to soften our hearts because we don't know how many more moments we will get with those we care about. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to leave behind something that lasts longer than we do. The temporary nature of life pushes us to invest in things that endure beyond our midst, like existence, things like love, faith, and kindness. Another layer of this verse is that it confronts our fear. Many people are terrified of how short life is, so they avoid thinking about it altogether. But ignoring the truth doesn't make it go away. The mist is still there, disappearing whether we acknowledge it or not. When we face it honestly, though, it can free us. Instead of living in denial or fear, we live in gratitude and clarity. We understand that life's shortness is not a curse, but a call to focus on what matters. Fear comes from clinging to things that can vanish. Peace comes from holding on to the one who never does. That is the balance the mist teaches us if we are willing to learn from it. This verse also has a way of awakening courage in us. Knowing life is short makes us realize how foolish it is to waste time being paralyzed by fear of failure or rejection. If we are only here for a little while, why not step into the things God is calling us toward? Why not use the mist of our lives to bring light, love, and purpose? It reframes failure itself. Failure only feels final when we forget how temporary life is. But when we remember that we are a mist, we see that failure is not as heavy as wasted time. The real tragedy is not falling, it is refusing to move at all. The brevity of life is an invitation to live fully, faithfully, and with courage that outlasts the mist. We spend much of our lives chasing things that eventually slip through our fingers. Success, comfort, and recognition look so attractive in the moment, but they fade with time. Think about how quickly the feeling of achievement wears off after a promotion or an award. For a short while, you feel on top of the world, but soon you start looking for the next thing to fill the void. Comfort is the same. No matter how much you gather, there is always a craving for more. Recognition works in a similar way, lasting only as long as the applause continues. All of these pursuits give the illusion of fulfillment, but in reality, they are temporary and fragile, just like the life we are living. The problem is not ambition itself, but the way we anchor our identity to what cannot last. We measure our worth by titles, bank accounts, or the approval of others, forgetting how quickly those things can be taken away. One downturn in the market can wipe out years of saving. One mistake can undo a reputation you spent decades building. One shift in culture can make yesterday's celebrated person today's forgotten name. When we put our sense of value in these fleeting things, we set ourselves up for disappointment. They were never designed to hold the weight of our souls, yet we treat them like they are permanent. That is why they leave us restless even when we achieve them. The pursuit of comfort also robs us of growth. We avoid challenges because we don't want to disrupt the bubble we've built around ourselves. We numb discomfort with entertainment, possessions, or distractions, hoping it will keep us safe from pain. But comfort is deceptive because it dulls our hunger for more meaningful pursuits. When life is too easy, our faith grows weak, our character stalls, and our perspective narrows. Comfort convinces us that we're secure when in reality we are stagnant. It whispers, "Stay here," while time keeps moving and the opportunities God gave us start passing by. The tragedy is that by clinging to comfort, we often lose what really matters. Recognition is even more fragile. Applause fades faster than we think. Today, someone may admire you for your accomplishments, but tomorrow, that same person might forget your name. The approval of people is unstable because it depends on mood, perception, and trends. You cannot build your life on something that changes so easily. Chasing recognition is like chasing the wind. The more you reach for it, the further it slips away. It often leaves us more empty than before because it ties our self-worth to the opinions of others, and opinions are some of the most unpredictable forces in this world. When recognition becomes your goal, you end up living for a crowd instead of for your creator. Success, too, is not the solid ground we imagine it to be. Achievements bring satisfaction, but only for a moment. A new title on your resume will never keep your heart at peace in the middle of the night. A bigger house will not heal the ache of loneliness. More money in your account will not stop the cycle of comparison that eats away at joy. Success is not wrong, but when it becomes your definition of meaning, you'll discover it is never enough. There is always a higher goal, always another milestone, always a bigger prize. The ladder never ends, and climbing it often leaves you too tired to notice the relationships and blessings you lost along the way. We all know stories of people who appeared to have it all, and yet felt empty inside. Celebrities, entrepreneurs, leaders, people who reached heights most of us only dream of, but behind closed doors, they wrestled with despair. That's because success, comfort, and recognition cannot touch the deeper hunger of the human soul. They might fill the surface for a while, but they cannot provide lasting peace. They are temporary by design, and when we treat them as permanent, we end up disappointed. It's like drinking salt water when you're thirsty. It looks refreshing, but it only makes you thirstier. The fleeting nature of these pursuits also reveals how easily we trade the eternal for the temporary. We sacrifice time with God, relationships, and opportunities for growth because we are too busy chasing what will not last. We work overtime for recognition while neglecting the people who love us most. We compromise our values for success that will eventually fade. We build our lives around the comfort of today while ignoring the reality of eternity. In the end, we realize too late that what we chased could never satisfy the deeper questions of our hearts. The temporary always loses its power when held against the eternal. When you step back and look at it, the truth is clear. Chasing things that fade is not just exhausting, it is empty. It keeps us on a treadmill where we run hard but go nowhere. Every time we catch what we think will make us happy, it slips through our hands. Life is too short to be consumed by pursuits that do not last. When success, comfort, and recognition become the center of our lives, we build on sand, and sand cannot hold when the storm comes. The weight of your soul needs a stronger foundation than something that disappears the moment the applause stops or the comfort fades. When Jesus said in Matthew 6:33, "Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you," he was not offering a suggestion. He was giving us a principle for life. To put God first means to reorder everything else in our world so that he is the foundation, not an afterthought. Too often, we fit God into the margins of our day, squeezing him between our plans, our work, and our desires. But the verse is clear. Seeking him first is not about giving him leftovers. It is about starting with him. When God is first, everything else finds its place. When he is not, everything feels scattered, no matter how hard we try to keep it together. This verse challenges the way we naturally think. Most of us believe that if we focus on our own needs first, we will be secure enough to think about God later. We chase money to feel stable, recognition to feel valued, and success to feel important. And then we try to sprinkle faith on top of it all. But Jesus reverses the order. He tells us that when we put him first, the things we worry about, our needs, our security, our future, will be taken care of. That doesn't mean life will be free from hardship, but it means that the weight of those concerns no longer rests on our shoulders alone. Seeking God first frees us from the anxiety of having to hold everything together by ourselves. To put God first is also an act of trust. It means choosing to believe that he knows what we need more than we do. This requires humility, because our pride tells us we can figure it all out on our own. We like the feeling of being in control, making plans, and dictating our future. But life proves over and over that we are not as in control as we think. Putting God first is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is acknowledging that the Creator of the universe sees farther than we do and has power where we have limits. Trusting him to order our lives gives us a stability that no human effort can produce. When God is first, our priorities begin to shift. Suddenly, the things we used to obsess over lose their grip on us. The opinions of others matter less. The pressure to achieve becomes lighter. We stop comparing ourselves to people who seem to be ahead of us, because we know our worth does not come from competition, but from God's presence in our lives. Seeking His kingdom first helps us to recognize that everything else, career, relationships, possessions, falls into place only when built on Him. It's not that those things don't matter, but they cannot define us. They become blessings rather than burdens when they are kept in the right order. Putting God first also changes how we approach our struggles. Instead of seeing challenges as interruptions, we begin to see them as opportunities to grow closer to Him. Trials no longer feel meaningless because we trust that He is using them to shape us. Seeking His righteousness means allowing Him to refine us, to pull us away from harmful habits and into healthier patterns. This transformation is not about perfection, but about direction. It is about walking toward God daily, even if the steps are small. The more we seek Him, the more we discover that His presence is enough, even when life does not give us everything we thought we wanted. There is also a practical side to seeking God first. It shows up in how we spend our time, how we use our words, and how we treat people. It shows up in the choices we make when no one is watching. If God is truly first, our schedules reflect it. Our decisions reflect it. Our attitudes reflect it. It is not about trying to appear religious, but about living with integrity that flows from the inside out. When we put Him first in the small, unseen places, it becomes natural to put Him first in the bigger, public parts of our lives. The order of our hearts always spills into the order of our actions. The beauty of this promise is that God doesn't just ask us to seek Him first without offering anything in return. He says, "And all these things will be added to you." That phrase is not about luxury or endless success. It is about provision. It means that when we focus on Him, He will take care of the rest. He will provide what we need, often in ways we could not have arranged on our own. That provision may not always look like what we imagined, but it will always be exactly what is required for our growth and our journey. God's additions are not temporary like the world's rewards. They last, and they satisfy. Seeking first the kingdom of God is not a one-time decision, but a daily practice. Every morning we are faced with choices that either put Him at the center or push Him aside. It is in the small, ordinary decisions that our priorities are revealed. Do we turn to Him in prayer before we rush into our plans? Do we invite Him into our relationships before we rely on our own wisdom? Do we let His word guide us before we let culture shape us? These are the moments that define whether God is truly first or just an accessory to our lives. Putting Him first requires consistency, but it is in that consistency that we find peace, clarity, and direction. Faith is often misunderstood as something complicated, reserved only for moments of deep crisis or religious ceremony, but in reality, it begins with something simple. It begins with one choice, a choice to trust God. Every morning when we open our eyes, we are faced with the decision of who will guide our steps that day. Will we rely on our own strength and understanding, or will we surrender to His wisdom? That one choice sets the tone for everything else. It doesn't have to be dramatic or showy. Sometimes it looks like a quiet prayer whispered before the day begins. "Lord, this day is yours. Lead me through it." That small act of surrender is the seed from which faith grows. Trusting God daily requires letting go of the illusion of control. We like to think that if we plan enough, prepare enough, and try hard enough, we can control the outcomes of our lives. But control is fragile, and it only takes one unexpected event to shatter it. Faith calls us to release that burden and admit that we do not have all the answers. That admission is not weakness, it is freedom. It frees us from the anxiety of trying to carry a weight we were never meant to bear. When we wake up each morning and hand that weight to God, we step into a lighter, more peaceful way of living, even when life around us remains uncertain. Making the choice to trust God also reshapes how we see challenges. Difficulties no longer become reasons to panic or shut down. Instead, they become opportunities to lean into Him. Faith doesn't mean we never feel fear, but it means fear doesn't have the final word. Every obstacle becomes a reminder of how much we need His guidance. When we approach life this way, we stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What are you teaching me?" The struggle itself becomes part of the training ground for stronger faith. That is why even the hardest seasons can produce growth when we choose to trust God in them. Daily trust is not always about grand gestures. More often, it is about consistency in the small things, choosing honesty in a situation where a lie would be easier, showing patience when frustration rises, extending forgiveness even when it feels undeserved. These small acts, repeated over time, are evidence of a heart that trusts God more than its own instincts. They may not look extraordinary, but they are the fabric of faith. Over time, those small daily decisions create a life built on trust rather than fear, and that life has a stability that circumstances cannot shake. Trust also requires intimacy with God. You cannot trust someone you do not know. Faith grows as we spend time with Him in prayer, in Scripture, and in quiet reflection. These moments are not about following a religious routine, but about building a relationship. Just as trust between two people deepens through time spent together, our trust in God deepens the more we invite Him into the details of our lives. The more familiar His voice becomes, the easier it is to follow Him when decisions are unclear. Faith is strengthened not by big, one-time leaps, but by steady steps of relationship day after day. Choosing to trust God each morning also changes the way we approach uncertainty. Instead of dreading what might happen, we begin to see the unknown as a space where He is already present. Life will always hold unanswered questions, but faith teaches us that we do not walk into them alone. Trust allows us to move forward even without a clear map, because we believe that He sees what we cannot. That kind of trust doesn't eliminate uncertainty, but it makes uncertainty bearable. It turns fear into anticipation, because we know He can bring good even out of situations we never expected. Faith that begins with trust also brings peace in places we never thought peace was possible. Worry loses its power when we hand it over to Him. The problems may not vanish, but the weight of them no longer crushes us. Trust is what steadies the heart in chaos, what keeps us anchored when life's storms hit without warning. Each morning when we say, "Lord, guide me today," we are reminding ourselves that we are not alone. That reminder itself calms the soul. It is not that life gets easier, but that we stop trying to carry it all alone. Peace is not the absence of trouble, but the presence of trust. This simple choice to trust Him each day also sets us free from the endless cycle of proving ourselves. When we rely only on our own effort, we measure our worth by what we achieve or how perfectly we perform. But trust reminds us that our worth is not in our performance, but in God's love. That realization takes the pressure off and gives us space to breathe. We no longer live to earn approval from the world, but to walk in the freedom of knowing we are already seen, already valued, already loved. Faith, at its heart, is that daily act of surrender, a decision to trust a God who is steady when everything else shifts. When we put God first, something begins to shift inside of us that no amount of self-help techniques can create. There is a stability that settles into the soul, a kind of grounding that allows us to face uncertainty without being consumed by fear. Life will never stop throwing us into chaos, but when He is at the center, the chaos doesn't define us anymore. Peace begins to fill the gaps where anxiety once lived. Instead of waking up with dread about what the day might bring, we wake up with confidence that God already goes ahead of us. That kind of peace cannot be bought, earned, or faked. It is the natural fruit of a heart that has surrendered. Direction is another gift that comes when we put Him first. So many people spend years wandering, unsure of their purpose, chasing goals that leave them empty. But when God is the one leading, clarity begins to surface. It doesn't always come as a detailed map, but as a steady nudge in the right direction. We find ourselves making choices that align with His wisdom rather than our impulses. This doesn't remove every question or erase every doubt, but it gives us the assurance that we are not lost. Even when the path is unfamiliar, we know that we are walking in the right hands. That knowledge itself becomes a compass we can trust. Hope is the third thread that ties all of this together. Without God, hope tends to rise and fall with circumstances. A good day makes us hopeful, a bad day steals it. But when God is first, hope becomes steady because it no longer depends on what we can see. It rests on who He is. He becomes the anchor that holds when the waves rise. Hope rooted in Him doesn't collapse when dreams take longer than expected or when setbacks come out of nowhere. It stays alive because it is not tied to the shifting seasons of life, but to the eternal promises of God. That is why those who put Him first often radiate a strength that feels unshakable. This stability doesn't mean we stop feeling human emotions. We still grieve, we still get frustrated, and we still feel the sting of disappointment. But putting God first means those emotions don't get the final word. Peace steps in and reminds us that pain won't last forever. Direction whispers that there is purpose even in the struggle. Hope assures us that better days are still ahead. These truths don't erase hardship, but they do reframe it. Suddenly, even the hardest moments become bearable, not because they are easy, but because we know we are not facing them alone. That perspective is what sets apart a life grounded in God. Putting Him first also reshapes how we view success. Instead of measuring stability by how much we own or how much we achieve, we begin to measure it by how closely we walk with Him. Peace, direction, and hope become our real markers of success. When those things are present, it doesn't matter if the world sees us as accomplished or not. We know that we are exactly where we need to be. That kind of inner stability cannot be shaken by criticism, rejection, or loss. It stays intact because it is built on something eternal rather than something temporary. That shift changes how we show up in every area of life. Even relationships are transformed when peace, direction, and hope flow from putting God first. We stop clinging to people in desperation because our stability doesn't depend on them. We can love more freely because we are not afraid of losing ourselves in the process. We can forgive more easily because we know our worth is secure. We can walk away from toxic situations because we trust that God will guide us toward better ones. The stability we find in Him allows us to stand tall even when relationships are uncertain, because we are not leaning on fragile foundations. We are leaning on the one who does not change. This kind of life also makes us resilient. When peace steadies us, direction guides us, and hope fuels us, setbacks lose their power to destroy us. We may stumble, but we do not stay down. We may cry, but we do not despair. The strength that comes from putting God first is quiet but powerful, like a current running beneath the surface. Others may not always see it, but we feel it carrying us forward. It is not about pretending to be strong, but about knowing where our strength comes from. That quiet resilience allows us to face storms that would otherwise overwhelm us. There is also a joy that comes from this stability, one that doesn't need perfect circumstances to exist. When God is first, joy begins to rise even in the middle of struggle. It's not forced happiness or denial of reality, but a deep gladness that comes from knowing we are secure in Him. This joy doesn't need everything to go right to show up. It flows naturally because peace, direction, and hope have already taken root. People notice it even if they can't explain it. It becomes a quiet testimony that points back to the God who gives it. And the more we choose to put Him first, the stronger that testimony becomes. Moments of loss or crisis have a way of stripping us down to what really matters. They shake us awake in ways comfort never can. When life is running smoothly, it's easy to live as if tomorrow is guaranteed, to put off what we know we should do today. But when the sudden shock of loss enters, when something is taken from us that we never imagined living without, the illusion of control disappears. It feels raw, disorienting, even unfair, and yet in that breaking, we are given a clarity that whispers, time is short, eternity is real. These moments, as painful as they are, can be holy invitations to reset our lives. When crisis comes, we often feel naked in our vulnerability. The routines that once comforted us suddenly feel empty. The words people offer can feel shallow, and the distractions we used to rely on no longer satisfy. It is here, in this fragile space, that God speaks louder than we've ever noticed before. He doesn't always remove the pain, but He uses it as a mirror to show us what we've been clinging to. Loss exposes the false anchors we've tied ourselves to, whether it's success, approval, relationships, or possessions, and reminds us that none of these things can carry us through the weight of eternity. Sometimes it takes being broken for us to recognize that we've been building on shaky ground. Crisis does not come to punish us, but to wake us up. Like a fire alarm in the middle of the night, it disrupts our comfort for the sake of saving our lives. It forces us to ask questions we've been avoiding. What am I really living for? Where am I placing my trust? What will matter when everything else falls away? These questions aren't easy, but they are necessary. They cut through the noise and bring us back to the truth that God is the only unshakable foundation we can build on. Loss has a strange way of sharpening our vision. Suddenly, the things that felt so important before, the arguments, the deadlines, the race to achieve more, seem small compared to the weight of eternity. We realize how much energy we have wasted chasing shadows while ignoring the substance of life. God allows these wake-up calls not because He delights in our pain, but because He longs for us to see clearly. He knows that without perspective, we settle for less than what He created us for. The pain, though unwanted, can become the doorway to a deeper awareness of Him. In these moments, some people turn bitter, while others turn to God. The difference is often found in whether we are willing to lean into the questions instead of running from them. God does not silence our grief or tell us to pretend everything is fine. Instead, He meets us in the tears and gently turns our gaze toward eternity. He shows us that while life is fleeting, His love is not. While people come and go, His presence remains. While circumstances shift like sand, His promises stay steady. This kind of truth only becomes real when everything else feels uncertain. What's striking about crises is that they not only reveal what matters, but also who we are becoming. They show whether our character has been rooted in something eternal or something temporary. They uncover whether we have been living for appearances or for substance. And in that raw exposure, God offers us the chance to re-center, to shift our focus back to Him. Sometimes that means letting go of things we've held onto too tightly. Sometimes it means forgiving someone we thought we could never forgive. Sometimes it means finally surrendering the control we've tried to maintain. There is an urgency that comes with these moments. They whisper, "Don't waste time," not in a panicked sense, but in a sobering awareness that life is too short to be careless with. We don't get to decide when the wake-up calls come, but we do get to decide how we respond to them. Each crisis is an invitation to realign, to live with greater intention, to love with greater depth, and to walk with God more closely than before. The pain is real, but so is the opportunity to step into something deeper and truer than we've ever known. When we see loss and crisis as more than interruptions, they become teachers. They remind us that our days are numbered, but also that our souls are eternal. They remind us that God is not just for Sundays or emergencies, but for every moment, every breath. They remind us that hope is not found in avoiding pain, but in finding Him in the midst of it. And though we may not have chosen the path of loss, we can choose to let it open our eyes to what really matters, and to who will never leave us, even when everything else is stripped away. There is something about urgency that changes how we live. Most of us assume we have endless time, so we delay what really matters. We put off saying the words we should have spoken yesterday. We hold on to grudges instead of forgiving. We tell ourselves we will get serious about faith later, as if later is guaranteed. But moments of awakening remind us that tomorrow is not promised. They stir a fire inside that makes us want to live differently, not recklessly, but with intention. Urgency is not about rushing. It's about realizing the weight of every moment. When we understand life is fragile, love becomes more than a feeling. It becomes a decision to show up fully. Urgency pushes us to love deeper, not in shallow gestures, but in ways that cost us something. It's choosing to be present with people instead of scrolling endlessly. It's speaking kindness instead of assuming someone already knows how much they mean to us. It's realizing that the opportunity to love may not circle back tomorrow. When love is lived urgently, it doesn't just comfort others, it transforms us. It makes our lives richer, fuller, more connected. Forgiveness also feels different when urgency enters the picture. We realize how much of our peace has been held hostage by grudges we thought we could afford to keep. Suddenly, the idea of waiting years to forgive feels absurd. Why carry the poison longer than we have to? Urgency reminds us that bitterness steals joy from the time we do have. Forgiveness does not erase the wound, but it releases the grip of the past. It frees us to move forward lighter, stronger, and more open to what God wants to give us next. That freedom is worth choosing sooner, not later. Standing boldly for truth is another mark of living with urgency. Too often, fear of judgment keeps us quiet. We think we'll speak up one day when it feels safer, when people are more ready to listen. But urgency tells us that one day might never come. Our silence can become complicity. When we live urgently, we start choosing courage over comfort. We stop postponing integrity. We stop blending in when we're meant to stand out. Truth is not always popular, but it is always powerful. And the time to live it out is now, not when it feels convenient. Urgency also reshapes how we handle our daily lives. Suddenly, the small irritations lose their grip. The traffic jam, the missed call, the minor setback. They don't carry the same weight when we know how quickly time slips by. We begin to prioritize presence over perfection. We stop chasing every distraction and start noticing the sacredness in ordinary moments. Eating dinner with family, walking in silence, praying before bed. These things feel heavier in meaning when urgency teaches us that they are not guaranteed. Living urgently doesn't mean we stop planning. It means we stop wasting. The way we pursue our dreams also changes under urgency. We no longer treat them as fantasies we'll get around to someday. We start seeing them as part of the calling God placed inside us, waiting to be honored. Urgency makes us take the step we've been afraid to take. It pushes us to write the book, start the business, mend the relationship, or speak the truth we've been holding back, not recklessly, but faithfully. When urgency is present, procrastination loses its power because the cost of waiting feels too high. There is also a humility that comes from urgency. We realize that we do not control the timeline of our lives. Each day becomes a gift instead of a guarantee. That awareness doesn't have to make us fearful. It can make us grateful. We wake up with a softer heart and sharper vision. We stop assuming we have time to fix everything later. Instead, we choose to do what we can now with the time and energy we've been given. Gratitude thrives in urgency because every moment feels like borrowed time, sacred and fleeting. Urgency strips away the excuses we've leaned on for too long. It removes the false belief that we can wait to change, wait to reconcile, wait to truly live. It calls us out of passivity and into action. It tells us that the people who need our love need it today. The dreams planted in our hearts are meant to be nurtured today. The faith we keep postponing is meant to be embraced today. Urgency doesn't let us drift through life half-asleep. It shakes us awake and says, "Do not waste the breath you've been given. Make it count." When we live only with our eyes on what we can see, life becomes a cycle of chasing things that fade. The paycheck, the car, the compliments, the next achievement. They feel important in the moment, but they never last. The more we try to fill ourselves with temporary things, the emptier we feel once the excitement wears off. It's like trying to quench thirst with salt water. It looks like it should satisfy, but it leaves us even drier than before. God calls us to fix our eyes on what is unseen, because the unseen carries weight that the visible world cannot provide. Keeping an eternal perspective doesn't mean ignoring daily responsibilities. It means holding them differently. We still work, love, and plan, but we stop treating these things as if they are the whole story. We realize they are chapters, not the entire book. With that awareness, the little frustrations lose their power. A delay doesn't undo us. A setback doesn't define us. We learn to remind ourselves that there is more happening than what we can see, and that unseen reality has the final say. That truth steadies us when everything around us feels fragile. Distractions are everywhere, and they are louder than ever. Social media, constant notifications, endless comparisons. They pull us into a cycle where our worth feels tied to what others think. Living with an eternal perspective breaks that cycle. It teaches us that worth is not measured by likes or by applause, but by the fact that we are created and loved by God. That reminder loosens the grip of distraction and helps us focus on what truly builds us. Instead of chasing validation, we start craving depth. Instead of wasting energy on noise, we start seeking what nourishes the soul. An eternal focus also transforms how we see pain. Without it, suffering feels pointless, like random punishment with no explanation. But when we remember that what we see is temporary, pain takes on a different meaning. It becomes part of a process we cannot yet fully understand. It may not make the hurt vanish, but it softens the weight of despair. We begin to trust that what is unseen is working for our good even when the visible story seems unfair. That trust keeps hope alive when the evidence around us looks bleak. Relationships shift too when eternity shapes our perspective. We stop holding people to impossible standards, expecting them to complete us in ways only God can. Instead, we learn to love without suffocating. We value the time we have with people, knowing it won't last forever in this life, and that makes us more patient, more forgiving, and more intentional. Eternity reminds us that people are souls, not projects. It teaches us to invest in them deeply, not because they will always be here, but because their lives carry eternal significance just like ours. Success also takes on a new definition. Instead of measuring it by what we can accumulate or prove, success becomes about faithfulness. Did we honor God with what we had? Did we live with integrity when no one was watching? Did we love when it was hard, give when it was inconvenient, forgive when it was costly? Those are the questions that will matter when the temporary fades away. An eternal mindset frees us from the exhausting race to prove ourselves in a world that keeps changing the rules of success. Living with this perspective does not make life dull. In fact, it makes every moment more alive. Suddenly, the ordinary feels sacred because we know it connects to something far greater. A conversation with a friend can echo into eternity. A quiet act of kindness can ripple farther than we ever see. A prayer whispered in private can shift the unseen. Nothing feels wasted when we realize it all ties back to something eternal. This awareness doesn't drain joy from life. It multiplies it, because every moment feels rich with meaning. When the world distracts us with glittering things that fade, eternity is like a compass pulling us back to center. It clears the fog of comparison and reminds us of what lasts. It calls us to build on foundations that won't collapse when life shakes us. It teaches us to stop clinging so tightly to things that slip through our fingers anyway. Most of all, it gives us the freedom to live today with clarity and strength, knowing that even if the visible crumbles, the unseen is still holding us steady. There comes a moment when putting God first is no longer just a nice idea, but a decision that feels urgent. Too often we assume we have time to sort it out later, as if later is promised. We get caught up in routines, pulled in every direction, and convinced that God can wait until life slows down. But the truth is, waiting only deepens the gap between who we are and who we're meant to become. Putting Him first is not about adding another task to a crowded schedule. It's about deciding who will lead our lives and who will shape our choices today. When we put God first, we begin to reorder what matters. The priorities we thought were unshakable suddenly look smaller compared to His presence. That doesn't mean we abandon our work, our families, or our responsibilities. It means we place them under His guidance instead of treating them as separate. Life becomes less about control and more about trust. Each step we take is no longer fueled by panic or fear of missing out, but by the assurance that God's way will always bring us where we need to be. This shift doesn't happen overnight, but it begins with one choice to let Him lead. Putting God first is not a passive move. It demands intention. It's waking up and deciding to begin with Him before the noise of the world takes over. It's choosing prayer instead of scrolling first thing in the morning. It's pausing to ask His direction before making decisions that will shape our future. These moments may seem small, but they create a rhythm that pulls us closer to Him. Over time, this rhythm becomes the anchor we lean on. Life still throws its storms, but we are steadied because we have chosen to center ourselves on something that cannot be shaken. This choice also has a way of exposing what we've been depending on. When we put Him first, we start to notice where we've been chasing security in things that cannot hold us. We realize how much energy has been wasted in trying to prove ourselves or cling to control. Putting God first unclutters the heart. It shows us that no relationship, no achievement, no possession can give us the peace that flows from Him. And the more we experience this truth, the less we want to rely on the things that used to consume us. There's also a freedom that comes when God takes first place. We stop being slaves to comparison. We stop measuring ourselves against people who are just as fragile as we are. We begin to see that our worth isn't up for negotiation because it has already been established by the one who made us. That freedom spills into how we show up in every area of life. We can love without fear of rejection, give without fear of lack, and forgive without fear of losing. This freedom doesn't erase struggle, but it makes us unshakable in the face of it. Making Him first also transforms the way we use our time. Instead of drifting through days as if they don't matter, we live with greater intention. Every word we speak, every act of kindness, every prayer whispered feels like a seed planted. And because God is at the center, we trust that no seed is wasted. This doesn't mean we need to do something extraordinary every day. It means we treat even the ordinary as sacred. Washing dishes, holding a conversation, doing our work. All of it carries weight when it's done with Him in mind. The beauty of putting God first is that it doesn't just change us internally. It radiates outward. Others notice a difference even if they can't explain it. They see a calmness in our storms, a steadiness in our steps, a joy that doesn't depend on circumstances. It becomes a quiet witness, not because we are trying to impress, but because God's presence naturally overflows. This kind of life inspires others without words. It draws them to ask questions, to wonder what gives us strength, and to seek the same peace we carry. And the truth is, there is no perfect time to begin. Waiting for the right moment only delays what God has been waiting to do in us. The call to put Him first is always now. Not after the job stabilizes, not after the relationship is fixed, not after the chaos slows down. Now is the moment to realign, to reset, to surrender. Each time we choose Him first, we step into a life that is steadier, freer, and richer than the one we cling to on our own. That choice is always available, and it begins with one simple yes.